Hi, this is Lee from the Law School Toolbox and the Bar Exam Toolbox. Today we are going to be discussing how to avoid running out of time on the performance test and what to do if that happens. First step for not running out of time, prevention. If you can avoid scrambling at the last minute in the first place, that's obviously your best strategy. So how do you do that? Well, you practice a lot of performance tests, or PTs. The more PTs you write under exam conditions, the more experience you will have managing your time. Second, you need a plan for how you're going to split up the time to make sure you're not in hot water toward the end. I'm going to be discussing a 90-minute PT format. So if you get extra time as an accommodation, be sure to apply these guidelines according to your individual time constraints. As far as breaking up the PT, we always recommend splitting your total time in half. For the first half, you read and plan, and for the second half, you write. That said, the reading and planning is not one task in and of itself. There are two separate steps, and they need to stay separate. You should break down the time you need to spend reading versus the time you need to spend planning. Think of reading time as gathering all the pieces of the puzzle, and planning time as when you go back and figure out how to fit all those pieces together. It doesn't really work to do both steps simultaneously. Generally, I recommend about 30 minutes as a max for reading and about 15 minutes as a minimum for planning. If you are a quick reader, you can dedicate more time to planning. If you find yourself reading more slowly, figure out how you can speed up. We will talk about that in just a minute. So you break up your time and you practice a lot. But what about the actual mechanics of the PT itself? What specific practical steps can you take? Well, let's go through a few. Number 1, use a clock. While practicing, set a timer and make it loud. The timing breakdowns I mentioned above are important to stick to. But if you have one running timer for the whole PT period, you may forget to move on from one task to the next. So my advice is that you start out by setting separate stopwatches with sound enabled. Once your 30 minutes of reading time is up, you'll hear the buzzer go off and know you have to move on to the planning time. If you do this enough, you'll start to develop a good instinct about how fast you need to move and what you can do in a given time frame. On exam day, you obviously won't be able to use a timer with the sound turned on, but you can use an analog watch or the clock on your screen. Number 2, divvy up your packet. We recommend always dividing the PT packet into individual sets of documents. The task memo is one packet by itself. Any additional instructional memo you may get is another. Then any statutes or cases form their own packets. This might not seem important while reading, but it will make your job much easier when it comes time to plan your answer. It's much faster to fit your puzzle pieces together the right way if none of them are hiding behind each other. Since you won't have a stapler during the exam, bring some mini binder clips to hold each of the smaller packets together. These grip better than paper clips, which can tend to fly off when you turn pages. Normally, binder clips are allowed in the exam room, but always double-check your exam ticket instructions for prohibited items just to be sure. Number 3, make sure your pages are numbered. The pages of the PT packet are usually numbered, but it's happened before that they're not. If you get pages that are not numbered, you may want to very quickly write your own numbers at the bottom of each page of the file and the library. This can help you make shorthand notes during the planning stage so you can refer back to a quote or holding you want to use in your answer. It will save you time if you can go back and find everything easily. Number 4, don't take a lot of notes while reading. Maybe don't take any. I tell my students to read the PT packet as if it were a newspaper or magazine, not as if they were about to get cold called in class or present something to a judge. Your goal at the reading stage is to get the lay of the land. Who are the parties? What is the problem you need to address? What are all the sources given to you in the packet, and what topic are you dealing with? What's the basic story? If you find yourself getting bogged down in the details, stop briefing the cases, stop highlighting everything, and stop making notes in the margins. Sometimes I tell students to sit on their hands. Literally, force yourself to just read without writing anything at all. If you want to mark something, mark the holding of each case. Remember, if you read relatively quickly, you will have more time later for crafting your answer. You can't see the big picture anyway until you've read everything. So don't try to map out your answer until you know what all the components consist of. Number 5, hunt and peck. Another thing you can do to speed up reading time is what I call hunting and pecking, as a first glance through the packet. Before you read anything, just sift through quickly and glance at the cases, assuming you get cases. You're looking for lists of numbered elements. If you find them, circle them. They are usually important. This step takes less than 2 minutes. Knowing where the factor or element tests are can help you avoid getting caught up in the details of each case when you come back and read them later. Okay, so far we've been talking about tips for how to save time on the PT. But what happens if you realize that despite your best efforts, you don't have enough time left? Let's discuss how you can avoid panicking, get unstuck, and write your best possible answer. 1. Stop spinning out of control. Do some box breathing and calm yourself down. This should take less than a minute, but it's 1 minute very well spent. So do this first. 2. Go back to the task memo. Do you already know what kind of document to write? Great. Put a title on your page. What about your audience? For example, who will be signing the letter you've been assigned? Write their name at the bottom of your screen. Is your tone supposed to be persuasive or objective? Getting the answers to these 3 questions, document type, audience, and tone, is critical. So do not proceed until you have this figured out. It should be pretty easy just from reading the task memo. Next, is there anything the task memo told you not to do? Make sure you follow that instruction. Is there anything the task memo told you to do? Maybe there was a second instructional memo with an example of the kinds of headers you should use. Be sure your answer incorporates exactly those types of headers. The takeaway here is do as much as you can to make your answer showcase that you are following instructions. Following instructions correctly is a big part of what you're being graded on. So if your answer clearly conforms to the directions given, it will get you points. 3. Use CREAC structure. Writing your answer in a clear CREAC, C-R-E-A-C structure shows the grader that you know what you're doing. It gives them what they're looking for in predictable places, so it is easier to skim through and award points. Did your answer have the right rule? All they need to do is look to the R in your CREAC to figure that out and give you points accordingly. Sometimes students wonder if they can hide mistakes by making their CREAC structure less clear and predictable. The answer is no, it's not a good idea. A muddled, disorganized answer will always score lower, and it comes across as less carefully planned and therefore less confident. So even if you're not sure if your writing is correct, put it into CREAC and make it easy to grade. 4. Know when to save time by deviating from CREAC. What happens if you've set up your CREACs and you realize there's no possible way you can finish all of them? Time to triage. Which issues are the most important to explain thoroughly? Make sure you have a full CREAC on those major issues. If an issue is more minor, you might be able to get away with dropping the E part where you set forth an example from a case. Not all issues on the PT are created equal, and it is your job to show strong legal reasoning and good time management. Part of that is knowing what to elaborate on and what to keep short and sweet. If you're a person who feels the need to start at the beginning and slog through each hurdle one by one no matter what, you might want to work on breaking this habit and practice becoming more flexible. When time is of the essence, the part of the CREAC that matters most is the analysis. So you may need to shortchange everything else just a bit to make sure you're analyzing each issue before you run out of time. Will your answer be perfect if you skip portions and salvage? Well, no, of course not. But if you have the choice between throwing out a conclusion and throwing out analysis, toss the conclusion. It's worth less. Ideally, though, you will practice enough PTs that you have time to hit everything. 5. Don't leave anything totally blank. It's better to get partial credit on all arguments than to write a brilliant first section and leave the second section of your answer completely blank. Why? Because if your answer looks very obviously incomplete, the grader probably won't continue reading it. It's easier and faster for them to give you a low score and move on to the next PT. Remember, they are grading hundreds of these things. If they can tell at a quick glance that your answer is far from passing, they won't give it more time or consideration. Harsh, but true. So what you want to do is turn in an answer that does not have any obvious red flags. Say something for each part. Answer the question asked. If your plan was to hit 3 arguments, make sure none of them are left blank on your screen. A short answer is always better than a blank answer. 6. Don't try to bury mistakes by muddling your structure. Students sometimes ask me if it's better to have a less organized answer so that missing arguments can skate under the radar and go unnoticed by the grader. In other words, if you set sections of your answer apart with headers, won't it then be more obvious if something is missing? Well, yes, potentially. But it is much more frustrating to read a disorganized answer, which is another red flag to a grader. So like with CREAC, headers are always a good idea. Organization won't showcase your faults. It will help you more than it hurts you. Remember, these graders are not your professors from law school. They will not cull through your answer to find what they need. They expect it to be there, in the right place, stated correctly. If they can't find it easily and quickly, they will assume it's missing and not give you points for whatever it is they're looking for. 7. Assess your remaining time and how much you've written. If your answer is very far from complete and you have a matter of minutes left, ditch your planning and reading and jump into writing. This is a last resort option, but even if your scratch paper plan is excellent, the graders won't see it, and it's really tough to type up a thorough answer in less than 20 or 30 minutes. So if you find yourself staring at a blank screen with 20 minutes to go, just write. It might not be pretty, but it's better than nothing. Well, with that, we're out of time. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you want to learn more about our courses, workshops, and one-on-one tutoring programs, check out barexamtoolbox.com.